my name is Simon. My journey kind of started really by accident. I didn't know where I was going to be, but I would say the first time I had a hint of where I was going was when I was in high school, and I was a terrible student at school. I didn't pay attention to anything. I hated it. I probably like a 2.0 in high school. There was one class called psychology where I actually read the textbook. And I'm like dyslexic. It's so a dyslexic kid reading is like, that's how you know you're in the right spot. And so I liked psychology enough to the point of where when I got to college, I didn't know what to do, but I knew I liked psychology. And I thought I was going to be a therapist because most people told me in high school that I'm really easy to talk to and approachable, and I could do a really good job of summarizing, which is apparently an important thing for therapists to summarize how people feel. And then I found out therapists have their own therapists, and I wouldn't be able to probably remove myself from that pain and suffering because I'm the kind of person where I was raised by parents who are immigrants from Turkey, and so everything is on our face all the time. So that's not a really good skill set as a therapist. So I panicked, didn't really know what to do because I was now 2 years into psychology, and then that's when I stumbled into David's wife's class called Human Factors that Lucy was teaching. And she said, this is Human Factors 101. If you're in the wrong spot, you can go ahead and leave. I panicked. I didn't leave. And then it got really awkward. And then I stayed. And then that's when I found out that I really like this field called Human Factors, which is the study of how people interact with systems, technology, and their environment. And so I asked Lucy, how do I do more of this? And
This
she
is
said,
not the Lucy that came last week, by the way. That's a different Lucy.
oh, okay. And she said that, well, we have a grad program, so that's how you can do that. And so I applied for the grad program, got in, and that's when I kind of started my journey into human factors. And I was a research assistant in the wearable technology lab, where we get to study wearable tech. And my focus was like, how can we make wearable tech better for people? How do we make it usable, accessible, safe? And that journey led me to opportunities locally because human factors, while the study of it is how do people interact with systems and technologies, the practice of it really lies in safety because you only care about that to make sure that people don't do things wrong. And so this is really big when it comes to aerospace or medical because there has been a recent shift in safety in the past 10 to 20 years, at least in medtech, but maybe a little bit more in aerospace, which is safety was traditionally seen as oh, something breaks or the software doesn't work, and then how do you address those hazards, right, or those situations? But then they started to realize that more and more people were dying from mistakes than anything. In fact, mistakes or accidents is the third leading cause of death when it comes to reports by the CDC. And so, they realize, okay, we're making things and people are making mistakes and killing people because of it. And so that's what led to the birth of hey, we need human factors to tell us as engineers and making stuff in R&D and R&T, how do we make sure that people can use it? Because engineers are incredibly smart people, but a lot of times the downfall of engineering is we get into our own bias. We design it as if it's for us. And then the problem is that no one really is like an engineer except for engineers. And so because of this, I got opportunities at Medtronic to do a co-opship there where I worked in the cardiovascular group for about a year. And I got to work on a whole range of products there. And then that internship led to another internship, which was at NASA. And so that then transitioned into a full-time employment opportunity. So my first job out of school was working at NASA down in Johnson Space Center, developing the lunar space station that will orbit the moon one day. And so like my job there was really, as we are building this thing, can astronauts do what we're asking them to do? So, can they do it not only as we're building it, but can they do it in the harshest environment known to man, in the most complicated technology that we've ever developed, right? And so the unfortunate thing was the opportunity was in Houston, and no offense to anyone who's grew up from Houston or anything like that, but I was born and raised here in Minnesota, so I got homesick, and I wanted to come back. And like David said, Minnesota has a lot of med tech opportunities, so I was able to tap into the connections I made during my internship to find an opportunity to contract at Medtronic. And that contract lasted for a year, which led to another one at Abbott Laboratories. And then, during that kind of transition, I also found out that I could do this type of work through my own business. And so I started my own business to sell my own services because Human Factors is incredibly niche. It's really, really small. And so the advantage of that is because there's very few of us, and very few of us that have, at least that I was lucky to have the credentials, it became in high demand. So then I didn't have to be a full-time employee. I could do it through myself. And so I've been kind of doing that for the past 4 years, but really ever since I left NASA, I've been doing contracts only. I've never been a full-time employee anywhere really. And so, in that journey too, I've kind of attached myself to the U of M and education. And so for about like 6 years on or off, I've been a teaching specialist and an adjunct lecturer in the College of Design, teaching design. And so I've kind of had a really interesting combination of working in really highly regulated spaces, working with a lot of engineers, but then also even like teaching and helping folks like figure out what is design, how does that work? Because you need to understand design to really know how to make things better for people. So kind of it's like this weird combination of engineering, psychology, and design smashed into one. And so that is my lecture. Am I done? Can I just leave?
All right, take the day off, man.
Take the day off, yeah. So
All right,
that's the
questions
most
you have for
big.
Simon?
Yeah.
Can you speak more about what you hope to do with FDA, and are you going to continue your business?
Yeah, so FDA, the job is called the subject matter experts of human factors engineering. And so my job there will be when companies submit their products, they basically have to give a report to the FDA that says this product meets all of these criterias and standards, but then also demonstrate that it is safe. And so my job will be in that submission process, there's they get like a booklet, right, of all their stuff, like electrical engineering, mechanical, cybersecurity, you name it, right? And then there's one section called human factors that I will be looking at. And basically what my job will be is that in engineering, there's two general processes. There is the process of verification, which says that yes, we did build what we said we would build, right? So if you have a car, did you put a light in the car, right? And verification is the test you show people to say, yes, look, there's a light, right? And so that's what verification really is. Validation is the process of engineering that says, is it being used how it's supposed to be used, right? And that's where my job sits. Because if you make something like you make a car, right, and you make a pedal to, accelerate, but then the car goes backwards and people are now smashing the cars backwards, you failed validation. It's not being used how it should be used.
Technically, I pressed the same pedal and go backwards.
Well, yeah, thank you for ruining the analogy, right? So, but dang it, yeah. So that's what I will be reviewing, because, and what that review process will look like is like, did you tell me who you're making this for? Tell me what demographics they are. Tell me, what are their potential limitations? Because someone who you make for y'all's age group and your grandma who's like 85 has very different limitations and capabilities. Tell me where in this product, how do you expect them to use it? And then most importantly, tell me where the risk is, where the hazard is. And so my job is looking at this portfolio and submission, this story, and then basically judging first, did you do everything we asked you to do, which there's a guidance that says that. And then the second thing is, did you convince this institution that this is actually safe? And you do that by not only submitting the documents that we asked, but running the test and showing us the data that it is actually doing what you said it is. You'd be surprised at how often they don't do that. I've worked at a lot of places where they say, yeah, it is this. And then I will be the person that's like, we didn't do that though. And they're like, oh, it's okay, just submit it. It's like, okay. And so, so that's what will be my job. It's making sure that in that submission process, did they perform validation correct? And if they don't, we basically will reject the product. It doesn't go to market. And
Simon, can you talk about the thing I like about your role is that there's an opportunity to help elevate the entire industry.
Yeah, so that's one part of the job, right, is making sure the American people are basically safe. Is this product safe for the people? The other aspect of it is, there's a lot of times people will develop something, maybe they're a small company, 5 people, they want to pass, but they have no idea how to pass. So they'll ask us. They'll say, hey, we need help with this. And my role in that sense will be providing them with guidance. So that's another aspect of it, but then what David is also referencing is that because the FDA does have guidances, it will also be my job to update it. And so whatever we write has huge impacts, right? So we'll be kind of on a committee that's looking at this, looking at the feedback from industry that people give us because we are working for the public, so we are taking their feedback and input, and then trying to decide in a way, is that feedback gonna make people's lives better and products safer? And so a large part of it will be like that. And that takes a long time.
Hi, sorry, hi.
Yeah.
My name is Dar. My question was, you mentioned that your job is like a lot of like checking off boxes and stuff. Would there be times where you have to kind of like, would you challenge like the boxes themselves and be like, well, this product is for this group of people. I don't understand how these features make sense at all, like for this group of people. And then were there times where you have to kind of collaborate with engineers and business people as well to make sure about like?
So, the challenge there is that the FDA has to be fair, right? And the way that one way to ensure that reviewers are being fair to everybody is to go through a checklist. And so that leads to a level of consistency, right? But one of the things I was mentioning that I think is important is, I use the term story, right? Which is you're convincing the institution of whatever you're submitting is sufficient. And that's where dialogue and kind of that interaction can play a role, right? Because the context is very different. So like, I'll give you an example. The FDA requires a minimum of 15 people per user group. So what that means is like, when you are creating a product, people are gonna use it. The FDA demands that you identify who those people are, like clinicians, nurses, and so on. You typically group this group of people into what we call user groups. So you can say clinician, and a clinician means a doctor, a nurse, and so on, right? So the FDA requires you to do your testing with these people, and you must do at least 15. You have to, right? But, so that's a box. But there are products out there that I've worked on where the product is no longer continuing and the patient population is dwindling because they are so sick. But the manufacturer wants to get an update out there that will make their lives better. But to get 15 participants of that very sick population could take years. So this is where that element of judgment as well. Show us that you did what you could do. And then if you can't get there, then it's a conversation. So that's an example where like, yes, you still have to follow it, but it kind of depends on the context to really determine if the committee will deem it as.
Does that happen a lot, Simon?
It depends.
Because it sounds rare.
It is rare, at least like, in the divisions I've worked, it is pretty rare.
Okay.
Because most of the time, companies are not, you know, if products discontinuing, they stop it, right? And, I can't say who it is, but, unfortunately, when they
Does
first
it rhyme
released,
with Babbitt?
what was it?
Does it rhyme with Babbitt?
The product is like, you know, it's basically
Oh,
like,
by the way, this is being, not being recorded.
this is not being
This is
recorded.
not recorded.
Great, great. And so, you know, one of the things is like, it's very rare, but it does happen. And then a lot of times too, there is products out there where, in the context we're giving, it's like, it's a dwindling population. There is other potential breakthroughs in technology that could really change the landscape. And it could be the only product in the entire market like that. And so the FDA might deem it worth the risk to submit it and to forego some of the requirements because the benefit to the patient, to the American population is worth it. So it's really a story, that's what I mean. Yeah.
You mentioned you worked in contract work. You're the first contract worker I've ever talked to. Can you tell me a little bit about like that kind of thing? How do you get your jobs? What's your workflow look like?
Yeah.
And what happens when a contract ends?
Yeah. So, where to start? So, you can, I don't remember all the technical definitions, but the IRS defines what a employee is and what a contract or a business is. And one of the distinctions, and then I won't be able to recall it perfectly, but one of the distinctions is really what they call like the amount of control. So as an employee, your employer can basically tell you what to do, where to be, how much to work, and so on within, of course, limits, right? A contractor, on the other hand, is not, a contractor has much more freedom and flexibility than worker. So very simple example is, remote used to be a big thing during COVID. Now everyone's coming back to work, right? I have no contracts that force me to go in because they can't tell me that you need to be a certain place because then that's now breaching into trying to think that you're a worker, which I'm not. So it's things like that that kind of separate you, right? So that's one distinction is control. The second thing is risk, really. So when you take a full-time job, you are guaranteed a certain level of stability, theoretically. Like they will take care of your taxes in a way, of your withholdings. They will give you benefits. They will make sure that you get a certain amount every year. And you have typically some kind of structure, right? Of like, here's your boss, this is, and so on, right? So a lot of it is kind of given to you. Of course, some businesses are small and it might be different, but that's typically the structure. A contractor, you're completely on your own. So I have to file my own taxes. I have to do my own withdrawal holdings of my income. I have to report everything, and the job and the work that comes to me is not guaranteed at all. I have to find it.
How long is the term typically?
So in med tech, it's typically a year. So I work on a yearly basis. So that means that
Are you guaranteed that year, or can they cut you off?
that's another great. I'm not even guaranteed that year. They could. There's a lot of contracts I have where they can terminate at any time. So like tomorrow, my client could be like, "Hey, thanks, no thanks." I'll be like, "All right, that's technically in the agreement." So there really is much more instability, right? And so how I got into this space is basically because my field is so niche. Companies, let's say like Medtronic, have a problem every year, which is every year they try to develop things, and to develop things you need people to do it, right? At least until AI takes over.
Yeah,
Right.
it's gonna happen.
Right. So, but you need people, right? Every year their budget changes based off of a million different reasons, but they go, okay, you get $100, right? So we have $100 this year to make things, and then they go, okay, this dollar goes to this project, this project, this project, and so on, right? And then what they find out is that they don't have enough people. And so then what they do to fill the gap is they hire contractors to fill the gap. And the reason why they pick me over hiring someone is because maybe next year they don't have the money anymore. Maybe next year the project just gets cut. And so for them, a lot of times it's better to be understaffed and to hire external help than to hire too much and then start firing people. Because it's a legal risk. It's also a paperwork exercise, and you sometimes actually have to pay more because you have to give like unemployment and all of that kind of stuff. So in a way, it's easier to hire me and then be able to be like, hey, the project got cut. We don't care about you anymore. You're out, rather than the full-time employee being like, well, we don't know where to put you. We now have too much people. So, so in this example with my field, there's not enough of us in any time. And so they're always looking for contractors or for people. And every contract I've been given, they've tried to give me a full-time job because they can't fit it. And so that's the advantage of what my industry has, is that I can pick. And it's not true everywhere though.
And one more question that I like is, where do you find out? Is that like a club?
Yeah. So it kind of started out as there's always third parties. So there's always a middleman, like a recruiting company, that has the ins with Medtronic or Abbott, because Abbott and Medtronic doesn't want to spend the time to find people. So they go, you do it for us. Someone finds me on LinkedIn, someone cold calls me, emails, hey, there's this position here, it's 12-month contract, would you take it? And I get spammed that. So that's in abundance. That's how you kind of get through your foot through the door. But the caveat is that those roles are not contract roles, even though it has the name contract in it. You're technically an employee of that recruiting company, who then makes you sign a temporary W-2 contract that basically says, you are our employees until they cut us. Then you're no longer an employee. I still don't know how they can do this. I've been trying to research this. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so you're now an employee of the
Of the
contractor company.
Exactly. Which I don't do anymore, but like that's a lot of times if you get spammed from recruiters, this is the arrangement they give you. So if you try to be
Oh, I
like,
know why, because then the companies can't contract you because you're an employee.
exactly.
Okay, so they
So-
don't want you to be poached.
Right, and so what they do is they have so they call them prime contractors, which is like, they are the main point of contact with Abbott. Them and Abbott, let's say,
Have a
exchange
relationship.
money, right? And then they find people to fill Abbott's need, and then they go, well, every person I get, you will pay for it, and we've already decided this. And then what happens is, then if Abbott wants to hire this, they get paid a premium for this. Or then what else that happens is that if they don't, then you can't work for someone else, so they almost try to trap you in a way. It's this weird arrangement, it's kind of
Okay.
shady, but that's how I got in. And then what I found out is, I was like, why am I going through a middle person? And so then I made my own. But once you make your own, then the problem is now you have to find it. They were doing all of that work for me, right?
So you're saying like, once you're established enough in that community, then there is a club.
Yeah, there is a club. Oh, for sure, there's a club. Like, there's what happens is like you start to, once you get in the industry, you start to know what I like to call people who can say yes. And these are the people who can actually give you money. And then what you'll find is a lot of people can tell you no, and very few people who can say yes. And the only way you know that is by networking and talking with people and seeing like who's the big cheese, who's got the budget.
Okay, so once you know that, then you can start your own consulting company and do what the consulting company was doing to you.
Yes. You
That's how you
can,
know you've
yes.
gone up.
But here's the other thing, right? Is for me in this industry, only really big fish really use our services. So, because med tech is not a really, you can't, it's very hard to make something with a small budget, right? So a lot of times, the folks that need my services are like billion-dollar companies. Billion-dollar companies don't hire a guy and their dog. They are like, no, this is too much overhead. You're not that amazing. We'll get someone else, right?
Yeah, so they don't have to hire one contracting company that will give them hundreds of contractors.
Exactly. So, in a lot of the arrangements I have with these big fish, there's a middleman, but I found the middleman that would pay my business, not like I'm them and then they do the roundabout way. Because a lot of times too, like if you try to go for a small business, it's easier to do it that way, but they don't have money. Is always the problem. So.
Anyone here interested in going the contract route?
Own your own business. I'm pro that. Do
I hear there's a club.
it. Yeah.
Right, sorry. Other questions?
Hi, my name is Omar. I wanted to ask if you've ever worked with or like looked at a product that wasn't physical, like didn't have hardware attached, something like an AI company or something like that. And if so, what does human factors look like for something that's completely just software, not
Yeah.
like something you can touch?
Yeah. Most products I work on is software. The reason being is that software is becoming more patient facing now, right? And so a lot of times what my job looks like in human factors when developing software is really around usability. Can people use it? And that has two components to it. So one, of course, is the safety aspect that we've been kind of talking about, which a lot of times products use software to, let's say, administer drugs. So like, does the clinician even understand what they're looking at? Did they know that they just overdosed the patient? So like, that's a safety aspect. The other aspect is, if you don't make a usable product, you lose to your competitor. So a lot of times the testing that we do is determining, do people like this? Is it even of value? Where can we make this better? And that's a important thing because that sometimes is this deciding factor. Because the landscape is getting more and more competitive, and what makes a patient wanna have this product over another is ease of use, a lot of times. So that's kind of the two things that I do focus on when it comes to software with human factors is like, first, can they do what we're asking them to do using the software and making sure it's safe? And then the second aspect is, what kind of improvements can we do here to make this so that it's easier to use, they're much more efficient, and, you know, how do we increase satisfaction? And that's really just like basic, give it to the user, listen to what they say, and implement it. Sounds really dumb, but you'd be so shocked of how many people are like, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't get it. And I'm like, are we making this for you? Are you buying this or are they buying it? So, yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I have kind of a follow-up to that. If it was in the case where like you were making it, the engineer's making it for another engineer, like a company's making something specifically for like a higher end thing for someone else.
Sure.
Does that like look different? Is that kind of just the same process of give it to them, see what they think?
So the process tends to stay the same. You know, the results of what it ends up looking like is very context based. So like, for example, you know, building the lunar space station for astronauts. Building things for astronauts is very different than us. They have, 2 years worth of training of literally landing on the moon. And so you could make them something incredibly ugly and they will be able to figure out how to use it because they're incredibly smart people. And they think that certain way. But if you were to put a normal person like me in there, I would probably blow up the ship. So,
Hi, I'm Yogita, and my question is, I can see how what a lot of you do like relates to the psychology aspect of like, I guess where do you apply your like technical and engineering aspect to some of these?
yeah. So when I describe human factors as having kind of three focuses of like engineering, psychology, and design, the psychology focus is really the ground of the field. Because when I'm in a room filled with engineers, I'm not gonna beat them on engineering knowledge. My value is telling the engineer that if you think the user is gonna know what that alert means, because it sounds like the 10 other alerts, that's the value. It's like being able to bring the human side of what we're making to it, right? Now, I have to know engineering process because we are collaborating. So like engineering is done in a very particular way. We make requirements that define what we're building. We do certain tests to ensure these requirements are met. And, we publish those findings, right? And so if you don't understand the basis of how things are built, it's very difficult to explain where in this process we need to make changes. So like, for example, I had a system engineer I was working with who had 2,000 requirements, and my job reading his requirements is basically telling him, I can't test any of these, right? And that requires engineering knowledge of being like, okay, the way that it's written, the way that it's described, how the system works, how does information flow from one component to another is really important to make that judgment. If you don't have that, it's like, and sometimes people do in my field don't have that, you just come in and say, hey, this is not gonna be usable. And then they're like, well, what do I do? And they're like, I don't know, make it better. It's like, that's not helpful to anybody, right? So that's where the engineering aspect of it is like you have to understand how things are built, how things are organized, how, the process works, and then being able to even talk the language. Because you have to be specific. Like there's a product I'm working on right now that has a system and then 7 subsystems involved in it. And then each of those have its own components within it. And so engineering a lot of times is critical thinking, and being very particular. And so you have to have that mindset to be very successful. So,
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I think this is really interesting because I've never heard about human factors before. So I'm wondering, like, why is it important that it's its own field and not grouped in with something like product testing or user experience, like you mentioned?
yeah.
And how have you seen it like change over the past few years?
Yeah. I think it is being grouped in a way, right? The reason why it tends to be different than engineering or different than design is it's because a lot of times the thing we're delivering on is like you're really bringing the psychology component to it. And when you go to engineering school, you'll never hear them talk about psychology, like ever, right? Because engineers, there's a very particular principle and discipline, and what you teach is how to make something. But then if you now start having a professor to be like, all right, let's start talking about how people think, you're like, are we even in the same field anymore? And so a lot of times, you start, and I get it because like when you're learning, you have to have a base. You have to start somewhere, right? And with each of these disciplines, whether it's psychology or design, there's a certain process they are building your foundation for, right? And where my field starts to happen is you have developed a lot of foundational knowledge, and then now it's like reaching the pinnacle of where these things start to hit each other. And so like a lot of times, that's why you might not see it in undergrad, like a psychology course in engineering or a psychology course in design, because they're trying to give you, this is how design works, this is how engineering works, this is how psychology works. And then once you have that foundation, then that's when you start to see something bloom. And that's why a lot of times my field, you don't see unless it's in graduate school. And even in my graduate program, which was from here, they tell you you should take computer science, you should take design classes, and so on. So in a way, it is grouped, but the jury is still out on if it should be in engineering, if it should be in psychology, if it should be in design, should it be its own thing? Is it different than user experience? There's an infinite opinions on that. So I don't know. Does that?
I can also see in human factors, it's gonna split to like human factors in medical stuff and human factors in the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Because like no one human can contain that much information, right?
right. Yeah. I mean, it's weird because we do have overlap with a lot of other professions. So like you mentioned user experience, right? User experience is about making a product, better for someone else in a very loose term. And we have to know that because better products make safer outcomes.
But when you work on a team, you'll have a UX person and a human factors person.
This is very common, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It
Because
is
like
very
one
common.
person can't.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And the difference a lot of times is the UX person proposes the designs and the process, and then I go, person's gonna get confused here, they're gonna make a mistake here, this is not testable, and then everyone hates me. So,
You mentioned, especially when you went out and started your own business, that a lot of the work that you got, or nowadays too, is through your networking connections. Can you speak a little bit to how and maybe the skills that you've acquired in building these relationships and then keeping them over time?
yeah, I think the most important thing, if you wanted to do this type of own business in selling technical expertise is really being curious and really trying to figure out how do things work, right? So when I was an intern at Medtronic for the first time, I wanted to talk to everybody to learn how does engineering actually work. And people love to really talk about what they do, right? And if you show interest in what they're doing, it really makes it seamless to make connections with people. the other thing too is that if you become curious, it's my own opinion that you will be naturally better at what you do, right? And if you're really good at what you do, people notice. Um, and if you are constantly just delivering and doing things, that creates a type of your persona of like, oh, they know what they're doing, they can get stuff done, right? Once you do that enough, people start coming to you very frequently because not sure how much corporate or work experience you have, but like there's always one person that everyone's like, they are so good, we need to go to that person, right? They will get the job done. It's very it's not as common as you think. Everyone's just doing their job, right? And so when I was networking and starting this out, I started out very curious, learned a lot, and then that allowed me to do more things. And then because I was able to do things, then people gave me more stuff. And then if you just keep this cycle, then all of a sudden, you start to develop a reputation. And, once that reputation starts, if you keep it up, it just steamrolls. Eventually, you get to a point where now people are trying to pay you to be on the team to try to make things happen. So that's what I would say is like, if you want to start this, being curious is really important, and being really good at what you do is important, and it really starts with that element. Does that answer your question? I feel like I'm babbling too much.
All right, last question, Zach.
Yeah, I'm curious how you expect like the transition from like doing contract work for medical devices to being in like the regulatory body that oversees medical devices.
Yeah.
What you think?
I actually think it's going to be a lot seamless than you might think, because my role is really as a consultant or contractor is an advisory role. I am literally selling my services, saying I know what I'm doing. And a lot of times, like we were just saying, is like we're not alone on it. Like we're on a team. So I will have like a UX person or someone else. And so a lot of times it's coaching. It's explaining, it's trying to, someone's proposing, hey, we should go this way. I go, no, don't go that way. Like it's gonna be really bad because of all of this, right? Which is gonna be very similar to the regulatory role, which is basically you're applying your judgment or your expertise to know if this was the right way to go. So I think it's actually going to be pretty seamless in that sense. And it's it will be different in the sense that like, now what I say has a huge impact potentially on patient safety. So like, I think that will make me be more conservative for sure. But a lot of times when you go from like coaching folks and trying to tell them like, hey, this is the way to go, to not regulating, it probably will be pretty similar.
Simon, is there a possibility that after your however long stint with the FDA, you'll be even more valuable and you would go back to an Abbott or Medtronic?
Yes. Yeah. No, I actually, I was telling my wife as a joke, which is like in consulting, what you do matters, right? So like what a lot of times I've seen my colleagues try to do something similar to what I do, but I joke I have like the Infinity Stone. Have you ever seen Marvels where like Thanos has like the Infinity Stones? Like I have the NASA Stone. Now I'm gonna have the FDA Stone, the Medtronic, the Abbott Stone, right? And then like eventually each stone just keeps building, right? And that was really the break I had when starting out of school is like when you say you work for NASA, it's a prestigious institution. And so then opportunities for me compared to my colleagues are like they're throwing stones at me like endlessly. And some of my colleagues are like, dude, how do you get so many offers? It's like, well, these names carry weight, of course. And so the FDA name, especially in medtech, is, it's the holy grail in a way. Because now,
Yeah.
if I'm in the meeting, if I ever leave FDA, if I'm in the meeting, all it takes is for me to say, FDA won't accept this. And they'll be like, how do you know? That I worked there. And then it changes the whole meeting, right? And so, yes,
Are there other stones left?
you know, I almost,
Uh-huh.
before Homeland Security got Homeland Security, I was gonna be on the Coast Guard, and work for the US Coast Guard to help with like search and rescue missions. But at this point, I think it's a diminishing return. Because,
But it's cool.
yeah, it is cool, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, I think there is a diminishing return.
Okay, who, out of curiosity, has questions for Simon? Okay,
Hey,
right, no, no,
Oh,
I wanna share with the students that, I want you guys to have that as a connection to Simon. Yeah, like we're gonna switch over and Simon's gonna play friend Simon now and hang out with us for 10 minutes. But friend Simon, tell us about